What is happening? Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 is 15 years old now. Jeez. And in spite of its troubled development and reception, was still able to garner quite a cult following post-launch. Beyond the players who simply grew up with it as kids, many saw the potential that lied beneath its rather rough exterior, and couldn't help but be drawn to it. A game that, with enough time in the oven, could have been something truly exceptional. And, you know, less of this. And Chaosx was clearly one of those people because, oh man, Sonic the Hedgehog Project 06 has shined a light into my soul to the point where I'll be out, you know, like in public, crazy, right? And I'm thinking about when I get to come home and play it again. Like a kid stuck in class waiting for the final bell. I haven't had that feeling in so long. When I turned 18, I just thought I had to sign over all my joy. Not the case, it would seem. Well, I did give it some time for the hype to wash over so I could detail more accurate opinions, but even now I can say this is on its way to becoming one of the best video game remasters. Everyone has been singing its praises, updates keep getting better, the dang thing has its own Wikipedia page, I stopped waking up in a cold sweat pondering what could have been. If Metroid fans got AM2R back in 2016, then Sonic fans are getting their treatment now. What is going on here? Being a 3D game, naturally it's going to take a while before the final release, but the speed at which these updates are coming out isn't just impressive on its own, but it's also more than enough to keep the project alive and well during downtime, which has always been the nail in the coffin for a lot of these fan games. I remember back when Chaosx was the only guy porting 06 to PC, but then his channel went silent and any progress stopped with it. Come 2019 and Chaosx's first demo drops, 2 years pass into present day and we have a fully playable Sonic and Shadow campaign with a plethora of enhancements. This isn't just a port of 06 so that mods can come out for it. This is a fan-made remaster, set out to fix every problem in the original game, both technical and mechanical. And while I won't be going over every little change he and his team have made, I do want to highlight the major improvements that have helped elevate the gameplay to a state that I feel isn't too far from Sonic's best. I also find it hilarious that, according to the Wikipedia page, Chaosx hasn't even played the original game. He uses reference footage and feedback, but no hands-on experience with the source material. Guy hasn't even played the game and he's making a better one. Pass me a cup. Arguably, the greatest fix can be seen right away in the performance. If you had to pin down the single worst aspect of the original 06, chances are you'd pick the loading times. Can't really blame you either. Not only were they 15 to 20 seconds, they were everywhere, and while they still are, technically, being cut down to a 2-second breather has filled me with such privilege and fear of ever touching my PS3 copy again. It can't be overstated how significant this is, how much better paced the whole game is now. No more awkward silence every time it has to etch-a-sketch your disk memory. Hit the loading zone, read the hint, bam, you're right back into it. Where's the wedding? Any slowdown has also been completely removed, which, like the load times, has done wonders for the pacing and flow. The current build isn't the most optimized, you'll need a decent PC to run it well, but there are a lot of quality and resolution settings you can mess with to accommodate your build. Graphically, the game looks great and even better than ever. I was already fond of the more realistic environments and slightly aged up character models, so seeing everything upscaled and given new life like the higher saturation of Wave Ocean's water, the wavy heat effects of Crisis City and Flame Core, dynamic weather conditions of Tropical Jungle, and the rainy ambience of Kingdom Valley has only heightened my appreciation. When it comes to quality of life enhancements, where do I even start? Glitches are a pretty popular topic with 06, but this is a case where I think the reputation precedes itself, and thus gets a bit blown out of proportion. There are glitches, make no mistake, some of the most insane glitches in all of gaming, but rarely did a real show-stopping moment ever happen casually. That being said, it was indeed a problem, and Project 06 has done away with many. As a result, it has introduced its own assortment of bugs, as you'd expect, hey! But they're being reported and ironed out all the time, and even with those, the game as a whole feels so much more polished than it ever did on console. Big thanks to the far more competent physics engine for that. It still has its moments, but collision detection and overall stability has seen a large improvement. Characters actually feel like they're interacting with their environments now. Rolling downhill builds speed, running uphill poses a struggle. A running start will give your jump a momentum boost, carrying you through the air. The original game didn't have any of this. Everything was locked at a set speed and direction with no weight behind it. It didn't matter where you were relative to gravity, and so it felt soulless. And some would argue that the base game and all its level design was made with that soullessness in mind. So to mix in this new momentum may actually play at odds with the smaller scale level design, mainly when it comes to overshooting jumps. And they're not wrong. If you're at all used to how the old game plays, then it's gonna feel weird. You will overshoot jumps and undercompensate your analog presses because it is fundamentally different now. I was one of those people who wasn't sold on the new physics initially. Maybe my muscle memory finally went away or they tweaked a few things in between demos, but whatever the reason, I've since adapted to the way characters move now, and while not perfect or even ideal necessarily, I do think it's a step in the right direction. The only thing that does bother me is how slow Sonic and crew still are. It was a problem back then, and it's a problem now. When running in a straight line, you can really feel how little ground you're able to cover. I find myself spin dashing often just to go slightly faster, but even that is a far cry to the adventure games. Oh, Sonic! Only during scripted set pieces or with Mach speed abilities do you get to see any real high-speed spectacle. And God rest your soul if you happen to miss a dash panel. Oh no, it's okay, take your time. Even though the performance is great now and tighter platforming bits are unaffected, it can't help but feel a bit uncanny controlling a character so synonymous with going fast at a pace more akin to a casual jog. The scary part though, is that I'm not sure if this will ever be fixed. Like I said, these levels were all made with that slower Sonic in mind, so doubling the speed cap may end up breaking the game in new ways, or simply not meshing well with what we have. Although with the likes of Supersonic and Speed Shoes making their way in, it proves that the game can handle this insane velocity, at least when reserved as a power-up. So I'll remain cautiously optimistic on that, but I do hope a more adventure-style feel can be achieved. While we're at it, rail grinding speed needs a buff too. As it stands, it has no way of being accelerated like in previous titles. All you have is a small trick boost, which is fine for those sections where you're making a lot of quick turns and it's over in a flash, but in the more drawn out segments like Shadow's Crisis City, it's just not nearly as impressive as you know it wants to be. It's not very fast, which takes away a lot of the cool factor, and it goes on for 30 seconds. You're checking your watch halfway in, a real shame too, because as a set piece, I think it does look really cool. 06 in general has really great cinematic flair, sometimes bordering on self-indulgent with its constant camera changes and bouncing in a circle of springs around a castle in the rain only to be thrown back on course at the end. I mean, you gotta admire the commitment here. No idea is too radical for this franchise, and I'm here for it. But clearly, there are some outliers that need either sped up or trimmed down. Nevertheless, when there are this many positive changes staring me in the face, I can't be too picky. The project is in the best hands. So many little things that add up to an immeasurable degree. A lot of which that, to be fair, should have been in the game day one, like being able to jump on enemies, a faster homing attack animation, mapping the light speed dash to the triangle button, letting us perform and jump out of a spin dash at any time, mid-air control in Mach speed sections, sinking into quicksand instead of falling through it, lava chipping away rings, the snowboard not controlling like garbage, finally collecting these rings in Crisis City, goodness. Tails can actually use his tails again, what a concept. Knuckles doesn't miss every punch he throws, Rouge can kick enemies and dive like before, Silver's dash is like the coolest thing ever now, and I could keep going. But what's even more impressive to me are all the changes that weren't so obvious. The ones that most of us would have probably never thought about. Like zooming out the camera in specific rooms to get a better view of the enemy formations. The silver ball and aquatic base controls much better and can take an additional hit from lasers. Lots of mid-level cutscenes were added, unused dialogue was restored, new chunks of level design were made from scratch to fit certain plot details. Like in White Acropolis, when Tails goes ahead to press a switch, Sonic doesn't magically appear at the next checkpoint like he used to. Now a small passage opens up linking the two set pieces. Shadow's vehicles don't self-destruct when flipping, although the collision, his version of aquatic base, has a sepia tone filter to make it look old since you're in the past. The fire tornado in the Crisis City Mach speed section burns away rings if it gets too close, eventually sucking you up if you're too slow. A terrifying game over screen was added that gives Sonic CD a run for its money. Although it turns out getting a game over as one character resets your lives for both. Yeah, I don't think that was intentional. I could go on and on about the details that make me smile, laugh, cry, and then smile again, but for the sake of time, I'd like to highlight the two major updates that I think tie everything together. The scoring system has been reinstated from Adventure 2 and Heroes, as the original game didn't have one at all. You got points for destroying enemies and collecting items with a ring and time bonus at the end, but the score multiplier that would show up after doing a series of tricks was not. Project 06 brings that back with a vengeance, and it makes all the difference. One of the biggest design criticisms of 06 was all the forced combat. wave after wave of enemies with these hulking health bars using a skin-deep combat system where you spammed the homing attack so you could open the cage, hit the switch to open the door, and continue playing the video game. For a series that prides itself on forward momentum and high-speed action set pieces, stopping to do this mundane button mashing isn't exactly going to turn any heads. Now that there's a genuine point system with rules and boundaries, we have something we can finally engage with. When attacking enemies consecutively, you get a larger point bonus for each additional foe that scales better the higher you get. 2 enemies will give you 100 points, 3 200, 4 500, and so forth. And the enemies with bigger health bars offer more points. The catch is that the score becomes finalized when you either run out of enemies or touch the ground. You could be in the middle of a chain, but if you're not close enough to the next group, you'll hit the ground and be back at square one. This makes the order in which you attack things very important. You don't want to work yourself into a corner with no way to bridge the gap out, otherwise you compromise your score, instantly discouraging the aforementioned button mashing problem. And it goes deeper than that. Sonic can use his bounce bracelet to delay the score from finalizing for a few seconds. Even though you are technically hitting the ground, it primarily counts as an attack, buying you some extra time, and a few seconds in between enemies can go a long way. Interacting with pieces of the environment can also create a similar delay, like hitting item capsules, springs, rails, and even boxes. It all has a limit, of course, but this expands your range by quite a bit, opening up and linking multiple room layouts. At first, you may focus on defeating one room full of enemies, and then realize that there's a way to connect your score to the following room, and discovering that for yourself is pretty rewarding. Speedrunning is still good fun, but due to the lower character speeds, it's a lot less exciting than most of the other games, and so the score attack really stood out to me as the more substantial method. I enjoy looking for new ways to chain even more enemies together, using the bounce to just barely make it over, and seeing that rainbow perfect text appear with some ludicrous number above it is simply satisfying. Some S ranks will need to be beefed up a bit because this is just insane, but the process is still fun. I do realize that getting a high score is not everyone's cup of tea. It's not like there's major incentive to go all out. It really boils down to personal motive. Most players are going to treat it like a normal game, run to the end, kill enemies when necessary, and only do what is asked of them. At which point the shallow stop-and-go button mashing combat is still well within view. That's not just going to go away. But when looking at it through the right lens, I think Project 06 includes a shocking amount of depth that can help justify a lot of design choices that may initially come off as arbitrary or monotonous. And so I think it's important to at least consider that perspective, even if it's not one you may personally share. But if you recall, I did say there were 2 major updates to highlight. The first being the score, and the other Shadow the Hedgehog. I could not believe the metamorphosis that this character underwent. Fixing up Sonic is one thing because we at least knew what we wanted out of him. He has an established gameplay style that has worked in the past, and so it's the other characters where it gets tricky. How do you take the nuance and appeal of Sonic's high-speed antics but make it different? Well, one answer is you don't, and just make Sonic a Shadow clone, which is what they did for most of the franchise. And that is largely true here as well. They both have the same running speed, they homing attack and spin dash, which he did not have before, so that's already a huge upgrade. But what's unique to Shadow this time around is his approach to combat. And in the retail game, this was only a negative. Hurry up! His stages were flooded with more enemies that had even bigger health bars, vehicles that hardly worked, and a homing attack combo animation that took 7 years to finish in between every strike. Without a solid point system, there was no incentive to engage in such combat, and so he ended up feeling like a slower, clunkier Sonic at no extra benefit. Although we did have... Let's get moving! So, credit where it's due. But Project 06 has made a number of both visual and technical enhancements to the point where I actually get torn between which character I prefer to play as now. Shadow's homing attack combo has been noticeably sped up and the animation is more fluid. There's a cool glow that trails behind his shoes, an incredible new aura for the Chaos powers. The inhibitor rings, originally only used in cutscene, are now an unlockable super form of sorts. The Chaos Blast from his self-titled game makes an appearance. There's a little teleport animation when performing Chaos Snap, and once again, the scoring system ties it all together. By default, the sheer spectacle of Shadow's power now is enough to make a first run enjoyable, but like I've said, it's finding the optimal way to chain as many enemies together to maximize your score where the real meat lies. It also justifies the increase in enemy count and health, and doesn't take nearly as long. Unlike Sonic, however, you don't have the bounce bracelet to link these encounters. In its place is Chaos Boost. After killing no more than a few enemies, your your meter will be fully charged to initiate Chaos Boost level 1, which then lets you perform Chaos Snap. When homing attacking to an enemy that's out of range, if that same dash you're doing brings you to within about a second homing attack's worth of distance, you'll automatically snap onto the target and continue the assault so long as you keep the button held. And since your meter is always draining, you have good reason to stay in the action if you want to maintain that power. On top of that, a patch came out that resets Shadow's homing attack after throwing a Chaos Spear. It only works once in mid-air. You have to successfully home in on another target to reset the whole process, so it's not busted, but you essentially have 3 homing attacks worth of space in between every enemy now. Needless to say, this opens up an incalculable world of combos that's a lot more complex to achieve than in Sonic's story. Timing and positioning is a lot more strict compared to the more lenient bounce. I found myself using the environment more than ever to bridge these gaps. Crates especially came in handy for connecting adjacent rooms, and trails of rings can even be used to immediately dash across the floor and jump into a new group. I know this all may not sound or even look nearly as exciting as I'm making it out to be, and no, it's not perfect. It's not the deepest combat system, you're still mashing the same button to whittle down HP bars, and you do have to finagle the camera a lot to face where you want it to be. Sometimes to an unplayable degree where you need to know the layout in advance. Where am I going? But you know what? Man, it's just so much fun. I legitimately get a huge kick out of studying a room and discovering the optimal way to take out every enemy, grab every item, and score every conceivable point in one unbroken motion. Obviously, the game is still far from perfect. There's plenty to be fixed. Tails' flight has yet to be fully tapped into. His main gameplay is just flying over gaps. It's pretty basic and not very fast. He also has an unapologetic filler stage where you play a nearly unaltered version of Sonic's Wave Ocean. Omega, while I love the first-person turret mode he has now, his methods of attack are still ultimately slower and less dynamic than everyone else's. Mowing down Iblis creatures is fun for a couple rooms, but it gets old. Shadow's Wave Ocean is a bit haphazard with its enemy spam and is home to not 1, but 2 vehicle sections that weren't very fun in the original game, and not much has changed. Having a score system and branching paths helps the glider parts, but the control on all of these is really off. Chaosx has been working on it, but even he admits to not fully understanding what needs to be done about them. If anything, the glider should control more like a Star Fox game, and the motorcycle should be like your typical racer. I mean, there's a part where you're chasing a runaway train and shooting it down on your black and red motorcycle while an absolute banger plays. This should be like the coolest thing in all of gaming. And yet the control is so stiff that you're afraid to turn the wheel in fear of going off course. Dusty Desert is really boxed in for a lot of it, which isn't doing Omega any favors. The collision on stairs is epileptic. Camera could use some work, and what's going on here? I wish Chaos Boost didn't drain when going through scripted level bits because it's a complete waste. Shadow's combo attack can get stuck in mid-air, wasting precious time. 1-ups respawn when you die, so in places where 2 are close together, you can grind for as many you want, which should never be a thing. Rail grinding and light speed dashes should give you points, because not only did previous games already do that, but there are many spots where a rail is present, acting as a great way to connect 2 groups of enemies, and you don't even need it thanks to Sonic's bounce or Shadow's Chaos Spear tech. A grind bonus would incentivize further experimentation with your surroundings and add yet another layer to movement complexity. Also, homing onto rails from the side usually sends you backwards and so yeah, it's got problems, but so much has been fixed and will continue to be fixed that a list of hiccups really can't bother me, because 1, they're probably not even going to be there later, and 2, I know I'm going to be having too much fun to care. I adore what Chaosx and everyone else involved have done here. I'm still giddy that I have a version of Sonic 06 on my PC with 2-second load times and no slowdown. I just can't get over it. It's a Christmas miracle. I have nothing but the highest of hopes for this project, and it has nothing but my full support. Normally, I wouldn't be very optimistic to see fans try and fix Silver's campaign, and even now, I have a hard time imagining what they can do to make it fun, but from what they've given us so far, I have faith. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya.